This video is for a review of Lohfink pages 51 to 60 on being the people of God. The gathering is the mission. It's going to focus on some themes like revelation, trust, and forming a community of loving persons. It's going to go into free will with the voluntariness of this. So the first question goes to explaining the connection between gathering, salvation, and return from exile. And the first thing Lohfink is going to focus on is the 12 tribes in their original conception. Remember, were 12 distinct or different groups. A lot of them were founded in Canaan. Even if there was a group that escaped from slavery in Egypt, it seems like they might have originally been from the Canaanite area. But some of these people were marauders. So they would have been raided, these other villages, and had a kind of a rough history, maybe with some of the other members of the people who became the early Israelites. We see allegories to tension between farmers and herders in stories like Cain and Abel. So these groups of people that came together had reconciling to do. They had to learn to get along. Maybe sometimes they had long histories of tensions between them, and they had to choose something different now. So you had that originally in the 12 tribes. And so you see that parallel that, and after the exile, when people are coming back from all over the Babylonian Empire, and even outside of it, back to Israel, it's the same kind of thing. They're coming back, and they're going to choose to form a community of loving persons. They're going to choose to form a new kind of people. And so you see this, their early years as a stateless society helped them live in the exile and then later return from it. Because in those early years, there was no government, right? These are people who had escaped from oppressive states. These were people who had escaped from governments like Pharaoh's Egypt, the oppressive systems of the Canaanite city-states. And so they escaped and lived in a pioneer country. And then they heard the story of a God who cares about the poor and the oppressed, who cares about everyone, who created every person to be a dignified being. Not just the kings, right? Not just the people who are related to the gods. No, everyone. And so they came together on that common ethos. And to come together like that, to come to each other's aid, it took a lot of forgiveness. We see tensions between the tribes. Sometimes there were land disputes. We can see references this in books like Judges. Sometimes there were other issues, other things that happened. Violence between the tribes in the past, and even in the time of the Confederation. So you have these self-sufficient family tribes, these extended units. But they said, we're not just our own nation. We're not just our own tribe. We're not just our own family. We are part of something greater. And that's that voluntary and free egalitarian society. So it's just in becoming the Israelites, right? They're demonstrating that being the people of God, because they're becoming a community of loving persons, a community based on the idea that each person has an inherent dignity. Each person should be cared for and loved by the other persons, and not just about looking out for their own interest anymore. So this really served the Israelites when they went into the exile. They didn't need to take prompting from the Babylonian government, right? When the Babylonians, they conquered Judah, and they took the prominent Jews into exile. It means they took them into Babylon, and they were hoping they would just assimilate in a couple generations, as typically happens, and become Babylonians. But they didn't. Instead, they did what their ancestors had done. They did their own thing voluntarily. They formed these synagogue associations. and no one made them do it, and they contributed monetarily and came together culturally, and took care of each other, and it was all voluntary. So we see that's what Lohfink is talking about when he claims the mission of the people of God is the gathering of the people of God. That we must repeatedly and voluntarily come together, and that's going to require us to reconcile and forgive each other. Because we're always going to have these conflicts. We're always going to have conflicts of interest. We're always going to have one person stepping on another person's toes. But unless we want to regress into the types of societies that the early Israelites escaped from, it's necessary to form the community of loving persons and abandon communities of oppression and slavery. It's necessary to reconcile, to forgive people. And we see this in the Israelites in some cases where one tribe would give land back to another tribe. Or a person would forgive someone else's debt, money that they owe them. So that's what we're looking at here, forming a free and egalitarian society. And it's not a neutral kind of egalitarianism. It's not quite a rugged individualism. Yes, it does primarily provide for people's rights to take care of themselves and others. But it's not saying, hey, you go do whatever you want, right? I'm not, just as long as you don't bother me. No, it's like a family, right? Where people actually take care of each other. And sometimes even if someone's putting themselves in harm's way, there can be some discussion about it, right? There can be some warning. Okay, I hope this helps. Study for the final.